Hello Habibti, كيف انت? Hello my friend, how are you doing? In this video, I'll be teaching you how to tell the time in Maltese. I'm going to teach you some important time vocabulary and I'm going to teach you some hidden time expressions. And what I guarantee you is that this is undoubtedly the best video that you're going to find on the whole internet regarding telling the time in Maltese. So make sure you stay tuned in until the end. And if it gets confusing at any point, which it probably will, just remember that you can always re-watch parts of the video that you need. So let's get started. So the first thing you need to know is that contrary to how we tell the time in English, the Maltese time is only told in an analog format. If you're not sure what I mean by that, let me try to explain. Look at the time on the screen right now. In English, there are a couple of ways to read that time, right? Because the English language uses either the analog format to read the time or the digital format to read the time. So for example, here we could say it's 7:55, which is the digital format, or we could say it's 5 to 8, couldn't we? And this is the analog version. And if I just take you through a second example as well here, we could say the time is 3:20 in English. Once again, this is the digital version, but we could also say it's 3:20, which is of course the analog version. And this is how we tell the time in Maltese. We always use the analog version because we do not have the digital version. Now, I'm going to take you through some key words for telling the time in Maltese, which you will regularly see throughout this video. So you'll probably find yourself having to come back to this section every now and then to try and remind yourself. And yeah, I'll say the most common occurring ones first. And by the way, I don't need you to fully understand them right now. I just want you to be aware of them so that when I mention them again later on in the video, you won't be totally confused and lost. So first of all, we have near s. That's near s. And this means minus. We use this in replacement of the English word to when telling the time in Maltese. So notice how we say 5 in English, or 10, or 11 in English. This is the word that we are replacing when we use near s in Maltese. And just so you know, you might see or hear other Maltese people say net-s or net-seen in Maltese instead of near s. And honestly, you can use whichever one you want, it doesn't matter, but I personally prefer to say near s because that's just the way my nana taught me. Next we have u. That's u. And this means and. We use this in replacement of the English word past when telling the time in Maltese. So notice how we say 5 in English, or 10, or 11 in English. This is the word that we are replacing when we use the word u in Maltese. So that means that the literal translation of a specific time, such as 5 in English, is actually 25 and 5 in Maltese. Now, these next words can be used if you want to be more specific when telling the time in Maltese. So for example, if you're trying to arrange to meet somebody, you might want to say, I'll meet you at 8 o'clock in the morning or 6 o'clock in the evening. Of course, this isn't 100% necessary, just like it isn't necessary in English. But who knows, there might be occasions where you need to make it clearer to the person you're talking to. So to specifically say in the morning in Maltese, we say ta filgħodu. That's ta filgħodu. To say it in the afternoon, we say ta wara nofsinhar. That's ta wara nofsinhar. And wara, by the way, means after. Now to say in the evening, we say ta filgħaxija. That's ta filgħaxija. And to say at night, we say ta bil-lejl. That's ta bil-lejl. And just so you know, the specific translation of the word ta is actually of. So the literal translations of the sentences here are of morning of afternoon, of evening, and of night. But of course, we don't say it like that in English. Now let's take a look at the next one. Channel. Channel. Now this is of course a question, and the exact translation of it is what's the time? I know it looks like it should be pronounced channel, but it isn't really. Maltese people tend to say it more of a channel as opposed to a channel. Then we have l'horloge, that's l'horloge, which means the clock. Then we have yum or nar, that's yum or nar, and this means day. Leil, leil, meaning night. That's supposed to say night there. I'll change it very quickly. Abel, that's abel, meaning before. Issa, issa, now. Iktar tard, iktar tard, and that means later. And yeah, that's all the keywords done. As I said, go back and rewatch them if you need to at any point throughout the rest of this video. Also make sure that you get my free ebook from the description below to learn the 50 most popular Maltese words if you haven't already. And I'm now going to teach you all the different ways of telling the time in Maltese. And to do that, I'm going to take you through several different clock faces, just like this one, where you'll visually be able to see the time to make things easier for you. As you can also see, you have the figurative versions of the time on either side of the clock in black there, with AM specifically on the left side here and PM on the right side. And just above those in red, you have the Maltese way of saying that particular time. So in this example specifically, the clock face is clearly showing 12 o'clock, which could either be midnight or noon. And to say midnight in Maltese, we say nofs il-leil. That's nofs il-leil. And this literally means half of the night. You may recognize the word leil there, as we went over just a second ago, and this means night. And to say noon in Maltese, we say nofsinar. Nofsinar. And this literally means half of the day. Once again, you may recognize the word nar there, and that means day. And yeah, we learned about that earlier in the key words. Now let's take a look at how we say 1 o'clock. And actually, before I explain this to you, it's very important for me to mention that 1 o'clock and 2 o'clock and 12 o'clock actually, which we just looked at, are exceptions to the rule of reading clock time. In other words, they're said differently than the numbers themselves because the number itself isn't used. By that, I mean, see how when we say 1 o'clock in English, we actually say the number 1, don't we? Well, in Maltese, we don't say the number 1, and we don't say the number 2 either when we are talking about 2 o'clock. But as I said, these are the only 3 exceptions, and times between 3 o'clock to 11 o'clock are told normally, and told normally just by using the numbers. You'll understand more as I go through them, so don't worry. But yeah, for 1 o'clock in Maltese, we say issia. That's issia. And just so you know, the word sia is also the word for hour in Maltese, but in this context we are looking at issia, which is how you say it's 1 o'clock. And depending on whether that's in the morning or in the afternoon or evening or night time, you could either add tafilodu on the end of that to say in the morning, or tawara in nofsinar to say in the afternoon. And of course you could also add tafilashiya, meaning the evening, or tabil-leil, meaning at night, as we learned a few minutes ago when we looked at the main key words. But with all of that being said, to say 1 o'clock in the morning, you would say issia tafilodu, and to say 1 o'clock in the afternoon, you would say issia tawara nofsinar. So let's take a look at how you would say 2 o'clock. Issatain, that's issatain. And once again, just so you know, the word satain on its own is also the word for a pair of hours, or 2 hours in Maltese. And actually, I'm going to teach you something really useful that is slightly off topic now, but any word in Maltese that has the letters e, y, and n at the end of it, like this right here, is grammar that we call l'at imtenni, okay? And this is used whenever we describe a pair or 2 of something. So for example, one of the ways of saying the word day in Maltese, as I already mentioned earlier, is yum. But to say 2 days, or a pair of days, you just need to add the letters e, y, n to the end of it to make the word yumain. Likewise, to say I in Maltese, we say ein. But to make that plural and say a pair of eyes or 2 eyes, we say einain. But yeah, going back to the context of the clock, we are specifically looking at is-satain, which is how you say 2 o'clock. And to specifically say 2 o'clock in the morning, you would add tafelodu at the end of that, so it becomes is-satain tafelodu. Or to say 2 o'clock in the afternoon, you would add tawara in nofsinar to the end of that, so it becomes is-satain tawara in nofsinar. Now remember, 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock and 2 o'clock, which we've just been through, are outliers in the sense that we do not use the numbers themselves to tell the time. But as I mentioned, from 3 o'clock to 11 o'clock, we do indeed use the numbers, which you will see right now. So to say 3 o'clock, we say itlieta. That's itlieta. And the number 3 in Maltese, by the way, is literally tlieta. It's just that to convert it into an actual time, you need to add the definite article in front of the number. And the definite article, by the way, is just a fancy word for saying the in English, if you're not entirely sure. And in this case, the definite article is the e, t, and hyphen. So this section here that I've highlighted in its full and literal translation is the 3rd hour. Now let's look at how to say 4 o'clock in Maltese. L'erba, l'erba. Once again, the number 4 in Maltese is literally erba. So to convert that into an actual time, you need to add the definite article in front of the number, which in this case is the ele hyphen. Now let's take a look at 5 p.m. Il-hamsa, il-hamsa. Also, notice how il-hamsa ta wara in-nofsinar has now become il-hamsa ta filashiya, because I would personally consider 5 o'clock to be the evening and not the afternoon. Okay, next. Is-sitta, is-sitta. Is-seba, is-seba. It-tmienya, it-tmienya. Id-disa, id-disa. Now once again, notice how id-disa ta filashiya has become id-disa ta bil-layl, because I would say that 9 o'clock is the night time and not the evening anymore. Next we have l'ashra, l'ashra, and finally il-hadash, il-hadash. Okay, so now you know all of the different times if they were on the exact hour. So if somebody ever asked you the question shenu, which as you already learned means what's the time, you can say is-satain, or il-hamsa, or l'ashra, or it-tmienya. But what if you wanted to say even more specific times, like 3:15, or 7:30, or 5:10? How would you say these things? Well, that's what the next part of this video is going to be. And just so you know, it's pretty simple once you get the hang of it, but you probably will be, a little bit overwhelmed to begin with, and that's okay. You're learning here, okay? So go easy on yourself. So let's take a look at 8 o'clock for this particular example, which as you already learned is it-tmienya. How would you say 8:30 or 8:30? Well, all you need to do is add the Maltese word for half at the end of itmienia. And the word for half in Maltese is nofs. Nofs. So to say 8:30, we would say itmienia u nofs. Itmienia u nofs. And that little word u right here that you've just heard means and in Maltese. And this is something that I told you about at the beginning of the video when we went through the key words. But yeah, itmienia u nofs right here literally translates to the 8th hour and a half in English. But of course, in English we say 8:30. Now, whenever the big hand of the clock is on the right side of the clock like this, you will always add the word u between the hour and the specific minute. This is very important. So for example, if you wanted to say the time is 8:05 in Maltese, you would say itmienia u hamsa. Itmienia u hamsa. And hamsa, right here, is of course the word for the number 5 in Maltese. Now let's take a look at some others. 8:10 becomes itmienia u ashra. Itmienia u ashra. And once again, ashra is of course the number 10 in Maltese. And when you're telling the time in Maltese, all of the clock readings are used in this way. So like a random time, like 8:07, for example, is said like this. Itmienia u seba, because seba is the word for the number 7 in Maltese. Likewise, to say the time 8:20, you would say itmienia u oshrin. That's itmienia u oshrin, with the number 20 being oshrin, of course. Now, for 8:25, it becomes not itmienia u hamsa u oshrin, like you probably think it should do, because hamsa u oshrin is the number 25 in Maltese, but actually it instead becomes itmienia u nofs nies hamsa. That's itmienia u nofs nies hamsa. And this, in its literal translation, is the 8th hour and a half minus 5. In other words, it's 8:30 minus 5 minutes. And this is how we say it's 8:25. Now, please don't ask me why it's said like that. I don't make the rules, okay? But yeah, it's just the way it's said, I'm afraid. By the way, if you're not sure what all these numbers are in Maltese, I've already made a video about the numbers on this channel, and I'll link that somewhere down below so that you can watch it after this one. And I'm also going to be releasing another numbers video this coming Wednesday, so make sure you subscribe and stay tuned for that one, as I'll be teaching you all the numbers from 11 to 100. So you're not going to want to miss that. Anyway, by now you're probably wondering why I haven't told you how to say 8:15 yet, or 8:15. And that's because whenever the 15 is involved when telling the time in Maltese, we don't actually say the number 15. And instead, we just say the Maltese word for quarter, which is quite simply quart. That's quart. It's the same in English, by the way, because we don't say it's 8:15, do we? We say it's 8:15. So in Maltese, that means that 8:15 becomes itmienia u quart. Itmienia u quart. And for everything that I've just taught you on the right side of the clock, the same pattern emerges all the way throughout the day. So if we were to look at 2 o'clock, for example, they would look and sound like this. Issatein u hamsa for 2:05. That's issatein u hamsa. Issatein u ashra for 2:10. Issatein u quart for 2:15. Issatein u oshrin, 2:20. Issatein u nofs nies hamsa, 2:25. And issatein u nofs for 2:30. And that right there is the entire right side of the clock done. Well done for staying with me, by the way. We are nearly there. We just now have to take a look at the left side of the clock. and more specifically, how to say 25 to 9 in Maltese. And by the way, this is exactly how I explained it to my student Sheila many months ago, as she is a member of my online Maltese language course and gets early access to lessons like this. So remember how 25 past 8 was itmenia unofs ni es hamsa? Well, 25 to 9 is actually very similar to that, because instead all we need to do is swap the word ni es for the word u, because remember, ni es means minus in Maltese and u means and in Maltese. And of course we want to add 5 minutes on top of the time being 8:30, as this is what will make 25 to 9 or 8:35, which in its full sentence is itmenia unofs u hamsa. And the literal translation for this, by the way, is the 8th hour and a half and 5. But of course, we don't say it like that. We say itmenia unofs u hamsa. Hopefully that wasn't too complicated, but if it was, I'd suggest you do the same as my student Sheila and join my online Maltese language course, which goes into a lot more depth to help you start speaking with locals in just a number of weeks. Now let's take a look at the last few times. We're nearly there. So, for the time 20 to 9, we say idissa ni es oshrin. That's idissa ni es oshrin. Let me just break that down for you. So, hopefully you remembered that idissa is how we say 9 o'clock in Maltese. So, that's why that is there. Then we have the word ni es, which of course means minus. And then we have oshrin, which of course means 20. So, all in all, the entire sentence, idissa ni es oshrin, literally translates to the 9th hour minus 20, which might sound confusing, but remember, we actually do this in the English language too. We literally say it's 20 to 9. So there isn't much difference there. Oh, and also something I didn't mention earlier is that joining my online Maltese language course will help you learn Maltese so much faster than my YouTube videos will, because it covers all the key fundamentals of the language. Anyway, let's now look at the time idissa ni es quart. Idissa ni es quart. Remember, quart right here means quarter. So the literal translation here is the 9th hour minus a quarter. Next, idissa ni es ashra. Idissa ni es ashra. And ashra, of course, meaning the number 10. So this is how we say 10 to 9. And to say 5 to 9 in Maltese, you would say idissa ni es hamsa. That's idissa ni es hamsa. And of course, hamsa means the number 5. Now let's quickly run through the left side of the clock for 2 o'clock, just as we did for the right side of the clock. So for 25 to 3, you've got issatein unofs u hamsa. That's issatein unofs u hamsa. For 20 to 3, you've got itlieta ni es oshrin. Then we have itlieta ni es quart. Then we have itlieta ni es ashra. And then we have itlieta ni es hamsa. So now you've been told all of the different clock faces for both 2 o'clock and 8 o'clock. But what would happen if we were to look at 6 o'clock? And stay with me here because this gets interesting. For 6 o'clock, we of course have isitta. That's isitta, as we learned earlier. Then isitta u hamsa, isitta u ashra, isitta u quart, isitta u oshrin, isitta u nofs ni es hamsa, isitta u nofs, isitta u nofs u hamsa, isseba ni es oshrin, isseba ni es quart, isseba ni es ashra, isseba ni es hamsa, and isseba. So as you can see, 6 o'clock is exactly the same as 2 o'clock and 8 o'clock. And it's exactly like this for all of the numbers on the clock face. So congratulations, you have now learned 99.9% of how to tell the time in Maltese. And I say that because there are 2 tiny outliers that you might want to make a note of. And they are il quarta, that's il quarta, which is basically just how you say 12:15 in Maltese. And this works for both AM and PM. So that's il quarta. And then you have in nofsia, That's inofsia, which is basically just how you say 12:30. And once again, that's for both AM and PM. It's important that you don't get confused between saying this and the Maltese way of saying 1:30, which is issia u nofs. That's issia u nofs. Now, don't forget to check out my online Maltese language course from the description below. And yeah, you now know everything that there is to know about telling the time in Maltese. Of course, you'll probably have to re-watch this video back to understand it even further. But for the most part, the ball is now in your court and you are off to an amazing start. Narak dalwat. See you soon.